What is going on, everybody? This is SCPCRNP, aka Lack of Lepers, as you see in the bottom. What is that? Dyslexic. Bottom left of your screen, I suppose. Yeah, bottom right of my screen. What's going on? So here we are on Thursday, just doing our very casual stream where we just react to whatever. But not whenever. And so that leads me to pick up right where we left off, which was Tuesday. Tuesday, I thought it might be better than nothing, to stream from my phone while I was driving home. And you can see this. I left it up just for the shits and giggles of it. And as luck would have it, basically, about 7 minutes into the stream, I heard the worst noise that I think I've ever heard. And maybe you heard it too on the playback. But basically, it sounded as though someone had, like, caught a bunch of metal underneath my car, and it was just being, like, grated apart, very slowly. And so I stopped the stream. And I pulled over off the interstate. Hello, person who always joins my streams, the one person who does. I appreciate you being here. It's good to see you again. How are you? Everything good? Everything's good here. And I was just getting into that story. If you saw on Tuesday, my life flashed before my eyes. So I pulled over on the interstate to figure out what the hell, because it was clearly coming from underneath my car. Did I run over something? Metal? Did it get caught in the undercarriage of my car? I don't know. So I pulled over, and, not the most luxurious of neighborhoods, I'll have you know. And I had to get out of my car and basically get on my back and, reverse limbo my way underneath my car to figure out what the hell was going on. I didn't have to look very hard, because basically there's a metal plate on the underneath of my car that holds up all, just like the vinyl and some cloth. And for some reason, because the car is cheaply built, I suppose, that completely fell through. So there was this giant metal dish that was just scraping the bottom of the interstate at about 70 miles an hour for a while before I got out of the car and was able to fix it. Don't ask me how I was able to fix it. I was all by myself on the side of the road, interstate, essentially. And I just had to push it up, and I just pushed it up, and it kind of worked. It kind of did it again. I'm glad I didn't restream that night. It did it a second time. But anyway, that night I took the car into my garage, and I spent about an hour and a half underneath my car. And I basically just took some zip ties and just hoisted that buddy up by its own petard. And there it lies still to this day. So 2 days later, it's okay. It's working okay. So that's my story. That's what the hell happened on Tuesday, and that was not staged. I don't know what the fuck that was. So anyway, today you'll notice a couple things. First of all, there's no background noise. What's going on with that? Well, not much. Basically, what we're going to listen to tonight has its own music, and it's pretty aggressive. So I felt like I didn't want to compete with that music. We'll just let it do its thing. And so, yeah, I'm still coughing. Thank you for your well wishes. Appreciate that. Very nice of you. That's why I have this water. Excuse me. But just on the off chance that somebody's listening and you don't know it, today's the last day of submissions to the IndieCon, which is, the first contest for independent containment fiction. That'll end tonight, and we will start to vote tomorrow. So I do recommend you get into the SCF Discord if it's not too politically radioactive for your tastes, so you can vote. Whoever wins is going to get $250 from the LLC. So that's pretty cool, I guess. Unless you're someone who thinks that that's evil too. Anyways, but tonight what we're going to do is start a new series. I know that Tuesday we kind of teased the Discovering SCP podcast, and it's not that it's a bad podcast. It's a good podcast. I like that podcast. It's just that it doesn't really offer, at least the episode I was listening to, doesn't really offer a lot of opportunities to react or to talk. It doesn't really have any insertion points for, discussion. It's basically people having a good time and making a good podcast, a good show while they're at it. but there's just not a lot of, there's not a lot of discussion. So I kind of figured we'd take it into a different direction. So tonight, what we're going to do is start a new series. What we're going to start is about an hour and 20 minutes. It's nothing that we've listened to before, so I'm pretty excited about it. And we'll get going. You know who I am, so I'm going to take that away from the screen. So let me go ahead and share, and we will get going now that I've teased you. You ready? You want to see what we're going to do? That's it. That's what we're going to do. This is, let me do this. No, let me do this. This is DJ Cactus. He's got a YouTube channel. Not much on it, just a couple videos. That's cool. And I think both of the videos that are on there are live streams. And this one is well appreciated at about 800 views and some likes and comments and whatnot. So, anybody who knows me knows that, I've mocked and ridiculed DJ Cactus in the past. It is what it is. We all kind of do that to one another. I just happen to do it in front of you as opposed to behind your back. And some people think that that's much worse than doing it behind your back, and that's just the way that they live, and that's fine. And then even so, there's a lot of people who make fun of a lot of people in the space. Gosh, look at something like Kinch's Twitter. Let's look at something like Kumioi, Communism Will Win's Twitter. They're constantly ragging on people. So that's kind of what my relationship is with DJ Cactus. I don't want to say a lot more about him. We'll talk about him a little bit as we go into this. I wonder why it pretends like it's loading. There we go. I don't know what's up with that. Okay. At some point you have to respect DJ Cactus, right? Because he's, historical. Even if you don't think, like, I tend to think that his reception and his persona is a little outsized to the content that he writes, the quality of the content that he writes. But that's just a generalization. There are certainly DJ Cactus articles that are excellent, that really are, just as good, really, as any other example of containment fiction, and whose articles I wouldn't mind giving to people as a first introduction. Like, here's a quintessential SCP article, boom. And it's a DJ Cactus article. It's probably not the ones that most people would think. I'm not like reflexively contrarian, to the point where I, get into opinions that I don't want to have just for the sake of being contrarian. Not absolutist about that, but at the same time, most of the articles that I think DJ Cactus is DJ Cactuses that are really, really good are not the ones that people celebrate typically. Oh Death, I think, is pretty good. 1730, I think, is an awful article. I have no idea how it got so popular. But some of DJ Cactus's real great ones are, I can't remember the name of it, but it's something about a room and a house. There's another one called, I think, 10,000 Years. I think 10,000 Years is probably DJ Cactus's best work, in my opinion. And that doesn't count for much, I understand, but it's really good, really, really good. Anyways, so the other thing about DJ Cactus, and I'm not doing this to mock DJ Cactus, I hope you understand. DJ Cactus is, whatever you think of him, like I said, historic, right? Because really he is the most controversial figure in the history of the wiki. If you know your stuff, you understand that a lot of big things that have happened in the space happened as a result of just DJ Cactus. He is mountainous, whether that's a good thing or unfortunate in your opinion, is your opinion. But he is mountainous, so the smallest movements that he makes have ripples in the space. And when he makes large movements, these have large ripples in the space. So I think it's unavoidable. I think that if just from a historical, archaeological, and archival perspective, you can't escape the idea that DJ Cactus is not important to the history of the wiki. I think that's incontrovertible. Now, the reason why I like to still listen to what he has to say when he's talking, for example, the Sean Saxum interview that I think he references at some point in this, DJ Cactus also is a thinker. Okay, now he just so happens to think antipodal to most ways that I would think about a given thing, at least in the containment fiction space. And so for that reason, we often, this is purely one-sided, I'm sure. He barely knows that I exist. But we often butt heads, have somewhat of a nemesisal role with djkaktus. Once again, one way. But he offers a lot of, like I was just saying, in contrast to the Discovering SCP podcast, a lot of insertion points for good discussion. So that is to say, he offers very, very fertile springboards of philosophical discussion. And for that, I do appreciate what he has to say. I probably am going to end up disagreeing with it, but everybody is going to disagree if you get pedantic enough with things. So let's not read too much into that. So I really do appreciate it. And once again, I think regardless of what you end up thinking of, excuse the noise there, he certainly has more content that is commentatable, I think, than other things. So that's why we're going to listen to this. So this is a live stream that he did on 14th of November, 2021. And I don't really know anything about this. I don't know the context of this. It just sort of happens. So we'll start to give it a look-see. And if you got any comments or questions of your own, feel free to throw them up.
All right, here we go.
Look at the way, we'll just start out right off. Look at the way he's looking into the distance. Is he high or is he just that magnanimous? Who knows?
All right, here we go.
Hopefully it's not too quiet.
Morning, everybody. Getting here, I also just got here.
Hey, what a great speaking voice. Can we toast to that? What a great part of the reason I think Cactus Cast was so good, so successful.
So we're gonna keep it loose.
I hate that it's so quiet. Can y'all hear that? Okay. Can you give me some feedback and can you hear him speaking?
Just keep it breezy.
It's very quiet for me. Let's see, maybe I can.
Nice.
Okay, so now he's got the music going. So this is his music that we'll listen to. This is not my music. Okay, so I want to make that very clear.
Okay, well, we are. I'm here. If anybody wants to ask anything, I'll be around for the next hour or so. There's not.
So what's cool is, let's see something. What's cool about this is that he can apparently just show up and be like, hey, I'm here, and then people will show up and comment. That's pretty cool. You got to give him that too.
But I am here, which is half the battle.
Yes. The other half is knowing, as we all know. Now we wait. What's up, you guys? Wish I had brought some popcorn. Oh, I think I heard a sniff. That's nice. It's a Q&A live stream, okay? Q&A, question and answer session. Oh, this person said, PSA, lower back. Oh, this sounds interesting. Lower back your volume. The stream is not at level. It's quiet. We'll be checking on the audio in the live stream. Oh, okay. This is just a public service announcement for when you're done with this. I see. And then somebody, look at, man, he's got some real fans. I'll tell you how you know DJ Cactus has some real fans. I used to have a Curious Cat account, which is like this online social media thing, and I eventually got rid of it because it was too social media-esque for my liking. Excuse me. But, yeah. I used to get questions on there all the time. I was really surprised. And just looking back, the attention that that Curious Cat account got, I think was probably just a dedicated one or two people, because that really hasn't shown up anywhere else. And I'll be honest with you, when I did the config call-in thing, I thought that some of that would transfer over to the call-in, and I'd be getting at least some troll calls or comments. That really hasn't panned out. So I think looking back, what that means is that there was one or two dedicated people who would just constantly write into the Curious Cat, which is fine. And certainly made me look good, better. But these people who would write into my Curious Cat, and to a lesser extent Harmony's as well when she had hers, also given up for the same reason. They would constantly be like saying really creepy praise things about DJ Cactus. So it's either the case that there's these huge fanatics of DJ Cactus who saw that I had, I guess, insulted him at some point and then decided to just make it a daily routine to harass me on this Curious Cat. They would say some really interesting things. Or it's the case that it was DJ Cactus, which is kind of my pet theory. He kind of is that kind of person, unfortunately. And then the third possibility is that this was someone that DJ Cactus recruited, you know, like sort of tasked with doing that. So which one it is, I don't really know. It's pretty funny either way, I think. But that just goes to show you how fanatic people can be over DJ Cactus. And for example, you have someone here who wrote out and time-stamped all the questions that he gets in this stream, which is just crazy. Just crazy. I mean, that is so cool. So you got to give it. It's a nice spectacle. Once again, I don't think that the content that was written justifies all of this, but you know, it's quite a spectacle. Oh yeah. Yeah. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. I am going to turn the volume back up because it's just so quiet. I hope you can hear this. This might be a problem. Man, what if this is too quiet? I don't know. I can do this. This will turn it up a little bit. There you go. Oh, yeah. The dude really is just sitting waiting for people, isn't he? Decent beard there, DJ Cactus. Might I recommend maybe some beard oils? Those are awesome. Any brand will do. Not that you don't use them. I'm just saying that's what I like. A beard oil and a nice, thick, fluffy beard comb. Ain't talking about that little comb stuff, that little plastic stuff. Get that out of here. I'm talking about bristles, baby.
No, Ash, you're right on time, actually. If you can believe it, we really just kicked this thing off.
Really hope you can hear this music, otherwise I just look like I'm... We'll get to the content here in a second, I assure you. I assure you. Just
for it. I'll
jamming
be here
out
for the next, at least the next hour. I got stuff to do. I'm a very busy guy. You know, I got a lot going on.
Yeah. So this is just, wow. How 4 minutes in, just hanging out. No big deal. I should probably fast forward through this section. But hey, let's just enjoy the music, eh? I feel like this is too sensual, too saucy of music for just a question and answer session. Is there some sort of like mood vibe that is being, I don't know. Baby. Yeah. Ha! Yeah. Yep. Nice little elevator jazz. Not really elevator jazz. It's a little more than elevator, isn't it? This is like porno music. Let's just go and call it what it is. All good. All good, man. You do you. Certainly is soulful as well. Ballsy of him just to sit there and wait on people to ask. I think it looks like they eventually do. Background mute music and welcome. So it looks like the first question is at 5:30. Should we skip to it? Nah, we're 15 seconds away. Let's just enjoy. How's your day?
Cactus Cast 2 or we're out.
Here we
Oh
go.
my gosh, you have no idea. Oh man. Hang on, I'm going to talk about this for a second.
Oh, he pulls the mic
Since you
closer.
brought it
Thank
up.
God.
Also, good morning, Andre. Hope you're doing well.
Oh, the music is gone. Maybe I'll end up putting up some of my own music here after all, huh? Let's see. You probably have to suffer through an ad with me. 1 second. I got some pretty good background music. I'm not going to lie. Loose. So DJ Cactus writes music. I found this out when I listened to the Skip Squad podcast. There's an opening song that the DJ Cactus is credited with writing. So that's pretty cool to see that. That's something that me and him have in common. I've written quite a lot of music, but I'll never tell you where it is. All right. There we go. Now that's how you set a mood, baby. Okay. It's a little too loud, though. Oh, he still got his music back up. Damn it. Oh, it's still porno music.
Okay, so the Cactus Cast. Let me talk about that for a second. I'm going to turn this...
Before he talks about it, the Cactus Cast is the best, the best extracurricular media to ever come out of the SCP Wiki, hands down. Okay, way better than any other podcast ever made. I think that really, I mean, like I said, there's some good DJ Cactus articles. I really think that the Cactus Cast is DJ Cactus's best work. I think that is, you know, if you're looking at raw talent, you know, raw quality of the product that's put out, I think it beats any article of his hands down. Hate to say that, I guess. Maybe I don't. That's just how good I think it is. It's really good. So every other podcast wants to be Cactus Cast, period.
Music down just a little bit. It's a little too loud.
Yeah, you're just a little too quiet as well. Maybe it's both. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
There we go. So here's the thing about the Cactus Cast, because people ask me about this a lot, actually, more than you would expect. The issue with it is that it's when I started doing the Cactus Cast early on, it was a much different, like, I was in a much different spot, right? Because I was a relative unknown for a long time here. Well, I mean, maybe not a long time, but when I first got started, I was obviously, because I came at,
Excuse me.
everybody starts from nothing, right? So
Unless you're around your house. In which case you may have been born with a silver spoon in your mouth on the wiki. I'm just saying. Is that the case?
when I was first doing the Cactus Cast, I was effectively interviewing people who were in what I guess would be like my position now, which is like they've been around for a while, they've written a bunch of things, they have been a part of the community for a long time, and the dynamic was different, right? Because it was me, a small person, interviewing people who were not bigger than I am, but like,
Are those Beats headphones, bro? Can you see? I don't know if you can see that. There you go. That's what's up. That is what's up, my man. You see in the back there. HD, what is it, 598? Shit. Sennheiser, baby. Let's get back to it.
Yeah. They were in a different kind of position, right? And so then, as time progressed, I did a lot of those, and a lot of those interviews were very, very cool. I really enjoyed, the one I did with Hammer Maiden was really good. The one I did with Famine was very funny. Some of the others that I've had.
I don't think I've listened to all those. We should really listen to those together. This might be the next thing we listen to. Maybe not like right next to one another, just to give it some space. But we definitely are going to listen to Cactus Cast episodes.
The benefit to do. But you know, as time progressed, you get a little bit more involved in a community, and you kind of carry your own baggage, I guess, is what it was. And so I don't want to make it sound like I was, you know, this is a cop-out or anything, but it changes, right? Like you get to the point where you're not just interviewing people who, you know, are your peers anymore, which was the case, always was the case, and would still be the case. But like, you're interviewing people that you've had long relationships with, whether positive or negative, over a period of years, and that's a little bit harder, I think, because it's hard to go into those interviews without carrying a lot of that baggage, right?
Okay, so I think what was just said was that Cactus Cast became unfeasible because of the drama, the political and social drama that ended up existing between DJ Cactus and other people. That's, I guess, what I take from that. Which is really odd in a lot of ways. Does that mean that people didn't want to do it anymore with him? I doubt that. Or that it just became too awkward to interview people who you have somewhat of a history with. You know, I think there's a good point here, which is that you know, those sorts of roles where you're sort of like, you know, this is all sort of like archival, right? It's a sort of archaeology when you interview somebody from the SCP Wiki about what they're doing. And it's always beneficial to be a little parallel to the pack in that regard. And I think that's what DJ Cactus, if I was to strongman what he's saying, because it's coming off as a little odd, I'm not going to lie. If I was to strongman what he was saying, that's what I would say, is that when you're when you are mixed up with these social dynamics, things do get a little messier. I guess that's what he's trying to say. And it behooves someone who's trying to do something like this to stay removed a little bit, you know. So, you know, I think on the one hand, it's not a cop-out. It's just disappointing, I think, that that the engine of Cactus Cast, the heart of that machine, was something that apparently was contingent upon how well received the host was with regards to whoever was being interviewed, which is kind of a shame. I think, honestly, this, I don't want to get too deep or, you know, too like cheesy, I guess, but, you know, we live in a society kind of stuff. But with the way the SCP is set up is that, you know, people who have dissonance with one another, people who have turmoil between one another, they often just sort of, this is the vibe I get, they sort of ignore each other, you know. It's not a confrontation sort of space. It's a space where people are trying their hardest to minimize that, which is fine. Obviously, socially, that's a good trait to have. But intellectually, philosophically, and certainly on the grounds and in the domain that a successful podcast is going to have to operate on, that's a really poor that's a poor posture to have. And it's a shame that the Cactus Cast didn't survive that, is what I'm saying.
Which is actually what it's why I really like Taryn Honey and Darnell's show, Discovering SCP.
It's a good one
for a variety of reasons.
But see, that's even kind of taken over that one too, because Darnell obviously started out as somebody who doesn't know anything about the wiki, you know, with Taryn Honey. I mean, there was this wonderful sort of like fulcrum, you know, this like seesaw kind of setup where there was just one person who knew everything and the one person who didn't, you know. And now, you know, now that's a little different too. So maybe it's the same thing he's talking about.
One of them is that, for better or worse, especially Darnell, you know, when they started was generally disconnected from most of the politics, I guess, is what I'm looking to say.
Exactly.
So he didn't carry that with him.
Yep.
And that's important, I think, because you get a more genuine response to people now. There are questions that I can't.
I think it's also interesting to notice and then maybe ask the question of what the Cactus Cast's relationship was to DJ Cactus's on-site trajectory as someone who's popular. Surely it had a lot to do with it, right? He just told us that when he started out, there was this sort of asymmetry with who he was interviewing, these being big figures on the site, and he was relatively unknown. Of course, by the time the Cactus Cast ended, as he's saying, that really changed. But that does mean, that the Cactus Cast saw DJ Cactus become a very popular figure on the SCP Wiki. Now, the question that I'm interested in, and that I'm not trying to be a dick about, I'm just interested in the question. I think it's a good question. Is how separable is DJ Cactus's rise to popularity and success and all the things that he likes to list as achievements and accolades? How dissociable is that from the success of the Cactus Cast? In my way of seeing things a lot, because once again, I don't necessarily think that the quality of his writing is, symmetric with the reception. So maybe that's part of it, and that's really, by the way, the sort of platform, the sort of angle, the spin that a lot of authors on the SCP Wiki, I think, have tried to harness, which is, you sort of build your likability in extracurricular things. And then these things will, of course, naturally feed into the success that you receive on the site, whether it's automatic attention for your articles or whether it's just a bias from the fact that people know that you have written this article prior to them reading it. There are people on the SCP Wiki who have exploited this, who have hacked this, who have hacked the whole setup to get more, I think, favorable reviews and more sort of stock automatic padding, anti-handicap, if you will, for their works, for their writing, which is a shame. It's a real shame because this should be about the writing. It shouldn't be about a popularity contest. But we all know that things like the K-Cons are in part popularity contests. There's always that one person who's the exception to the rule, but who defines the rule by their exceptionality. So, it's just an interesting thing to think about, in my opinion. You almost have to do that, by the way, in the wiki these days. It's just so flooded and inundated with articles that people will judge your article based on who you are, period. And the best way to explain this without going on too much of a tangent is that at any given, and I know this because I've been watching the wiki very closely for the past 2 months. As you know, I read everything that comes out of it. I don't read tales. At any given time, your article is going to be the success of your article, unless you're somebody who has, a lot of social capital, an arsenal of attention that you can pull into the wiki from somewhere else, like Twitter, where you can post a tweet and everybody comes into the article from there to look at your article. Unless you have some sort of outsourced social mine that you are working. If you don't have that set up, at any given time, any article that you post to the SCP Wiki is either successed or sunk by about five or six people. And if you notice, which I do, that is to say, I do look at who's voted what new articles occasionally just for research purposes. It's usually the same 5 or 6 people. So any given span of time, 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, maybe a little longer than that, you have what is essentially an unregistered, unofficial staff team that looks at every new article and then votes. It's the same people. It's the same 5, 6 people on every article. And after a while, those people will rotate out. I mean, obviously, these people are just like you or me. They get interested in other things. That was a thing they did for a time, was read every article and vote on it, and then they go off. But someone else is very quickly taking their place. And so at any given time, you have this kind of front row seat, this front row bench of about 5 to 6 people. And depending on about how those 6 people or so vote on your article is the fate of your article, period. Because as soon as you get about, and this is cumulative, so as soon as you get about 2 to 3 people in either direction, it's probably going to be good in that direction. So that is to say, if the first 3 people don't like your article, it's done. A -3 is not going back up. Very rarely does that happen. It's 99.99% of the time it continues in that trajectory. It usually doesn't flip the polarity of it like that. So that is to say, at any given time, there's a front row seat of people at the SCP Wiki, and these are generally brand new people because the ones who have been around a lot don't have time for this. Okay, they don't do this anymore. The people who really know what they're doing don't do this. This is the people with the newest, the most, the least educated. I hate to say it that way, but this is the newest voters in the site, the newest people, the newest, freshest, ripest aesthetics on the site, who are basically driving the definition of quality at the wiki. Unless you do something like this and you pull in social capital from somewhere else to escape that. Typically, people are too small to escape that web. If you're a big person, you can fly through that web. That's kind of how it works.
Ask people, right, at this point, because of a past experience I've had with somebody, or context with.
I mean, once again, he just said he's not able to ask certain people questions. I just don't see how you can do that. Like, unless you're valuing. I mean, it's one thing to be respectful of people. I'm not saying you shouldn't be. It's just that if you're running a podcast and your purpose is to make a good product, like, shouldn't something in the process override the awkwardness of having to ask a question to somebody that you don't want to ask? It's just my question.
In regards to my own kind of stuff in the past, so
it must have been really bad. I don't know what it is.
Plus, like, I don't know. I enjoy the interview format, and I feel like it's something that I have been decent at in the past.
Really good at. Don't sell yourself short there. Real good.
But it's always, you never really know, like, how well people are going to respond to that kind of thing. So, I don't know. As far as Cactus Cast 2 is concerned, it probably is not ever really going to take shape. But
I can guarantee you it won't. It probably shouldn't.
But what I wanted to do in the more recent past is do everything I can to support new content creators, and especially new people who are trying to do interviews and run their own podcasts. I think that's really important. In fact, the one that I started doing yesterday with my boy Sean Saxon, we started.
That's a good interview. You should really check that out.
We did half of an interview, which was nice, before I had to leave in the middle of it. But we're going to pick that one back up soon.
I feel you. In fact, just to FYI, we're going to try to, I'm desperately trying to get back on, a regular schedule here. It's just that it's really hard for this to happen with my job in the next month. I'm on call a lot, which means that at any moment I could just have to leave. That includes tomorrow night. That includes Sunday, for the SCP meta that we have hopefully coming up.
Those I think are important because, to take a step back, I think the entire process of doing interviews in this kind of community is important because, it's like the, how do you even say it? It's like the situation we had with the accreditation, or not accreditation, the
attribution.
What's the word?
The attribution.
The 2316 thing, right? When
Yep.
It was a big TikTok video, and then Volgan did a video, and it was all about like, oh, make sure you're giving credit to the right author, and that sort of thing. I think that's important, obviously, as part of like, a work, and part of the process. But I think another part of the process, or at least one that we should be striving towards, is, recognition of the minds behind the madness. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
It is easy enough to, say like, oh, this is djkaktus. This is a name attached to a web page, and this is the person who did this. But then when you see that person or hear that person talk about, what their motivations were and what their history is, in what they're what they are trying to achieve in their art form. That I feel like is pretty important.
I agree with you. I agree with you. That's like I'm talking to him. I agree with what he's saying quite a lot. In fact, that's really partially what the whole formalization of containment fiction as a genre is kind of trying to do. Like not in a direct fashion. We're not obviously doing all this so that we can stroke the egos of authors, mainly on the SCP Wiki, but it just baffles my mind. I've never seen a group of people so resistant to the elevation of the art form that they're doing into something formally recognized, just because people who they don't like or who have different political opinions than they do are the ones who are suggesting it. I mean, talk about hindering yourself, because if containment fiction was able to be recognized more widely as a legitimate genre, which I don't care what you think about the name containment fiction, the term, I don't care what you want to call it. You could call it whatever you want to call it. Okay, that's just what we call it. Okay, there's something there. You would have to be a moron to not understand that there is something unique, novel, characteristic, defining about the style of writing that is on the SCP Wiki. Period. And it's a very, very short jump from that to that same style of writing is happening elsewhere besides the SCP Wiki. The SCP does not have a monopoly on that style of writing anymore, right? And so at that point, you're at a genre, okay? Boom. Unique style of writing, unique modality of creative writing, it happening in more than one place, with more than one set of people, more than one person, I guess. Boom, you got a genre. A lot of mainstream attention. So it's just a shame because if people were less reluctant to lean into the formalization of the genre of containment fiction, they would find that these sorts of concerns, the sort of struggles that people have against things like the attribution issues of this SCP that he's talking about, which is the do you recognize the bodies in the water thing, those things would naturally start to resolve themselves because you would be able to be treated like any other artist in any other genre. But because this genre is not solidified, it's like people not seeing something out there that they don't have the idea for. They're not going to see it. So containment fiction authors are treated poorly. They aren't given the proper credit where credit is due, and they are sort of lost behind the art form because no one has legitimized the art form. I mean, they have in their own way, but no, not formally. And that's really what we're doing. I mean, it's something that needs to be done, and that's the bottom line. Fuck your differences of politics. I mean, the bottom line is that there's something out there that needs to be articulated, that needs to be given words, right? That needs to be given a name, and honored with description, and recognition. Not just the authors, okay, but the whole thing, the whole construct. So I agree with him. I think there's a way to do that while avoiding worship of the ego and actually turning the whole project into ego flattery, one big exercise of that. But that's another discussion too.
I feel like that is for any community our size, and even some, smaller than ours, you get to the point where it is less about, the name recognition and more about like the person recognition, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. It seems kind of a crazy thing to say, but
no, it doesn't. It's just the shame of the SCP is that people put so much stock into their brand name, right? A good example of this is that they don't really care who you are if you disagree with them, right? That's kind of a big red flag of that place. Because if it were about the person, we would expect to have sort of a diversity of ideologies and ideas and opinions and stances. Because, I listen to ideas all the time that I don't agree with. Just because I'm listening to them, they're coming into my head and leaving, doesn't mean that I endorse those ideas. That sort of nuance is lost at the SCP. And so, unfortunately, I think you get a situation where people are sort of lost in the greater identity of the whole thing because that's what they want to do. They tend to plug themselves into sort of a uni-mind, hive mind like thing. And of course, like I said, in addition to that, you have people who don't want to recognize that what they're doing is a legitimate art form and they don't want to give it a name. So
Anyway, that's how I feel about podcasting in general. Like, I think podcasts are great. There are a lot of good ones right now too. I mean, Toad King still has a great show that everybody should go watch. Foundation After Midnight. And there are a couple other really good ones. There's one I keep
Config
hearing,
Callin's pretty good. SCP Meta, not bad.
People talk about Find Us Alive, I think. I've
Yeah.
not listened to it yet, but I keep hearing it's really, really good.
I don't know if we're ever going to listen to that. No offense. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something that we would listen to on this show. Not everything is well fit for this reaction stream.
So I'm going to recommend people go listen to that, even though I've never heard it before. I keep getting, people keep telling me it's great. So
Cool.
Okay, let's see here. Attribution, Andrew, thank you. Attribution.
That's really the mentality that I don't like. It's like, hey, I'm going to recommend this. I'm going to upvote it because it's based on its reputation. Like, go listen to it first before you recommend it, man.
Is the word accreditation. What am I talking about? I'm not.
Yeah, accreditation. That's what it is.
Okay. 4960 going mainstream. Good or bad idea? Is that the? Oh, that's the. That's the sex goddess that Clef wrote a couple years ago, right?
That's right.
4,000 contest.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what that is.
Yep.
I mean, good. Here's what I'm gonna say. Good, right? Like any kind of anytime an article like breaks out into the mainstream, I think that's a net benefit for everybody because one, it's almost always random, right? Very rarely. I mean, there are always obvious like big things, but like when Day Breaks broke, Locke's article.
when Day Breaks broke. It's like that's pretty good.
Locke's 001 that she wrote back for the.
Oh, she. I hope I haven't been getting that wrong this whole time.
3,000 contest that eventually became a 001.
Yep.
When that one broke out, that was one crazy. I knew it was gonna be great. For the record, heads up, I knew it was gonna be great.
Hey, that's one thing we can also compliment DJ Cactus on. He knows he's got a fantastic grip on what is going to work on the SCP Wiki. You can be a really good writer, I think, and find no success on the SCP Wiki, period. This is really something that has grown on the SCP Wiki over the course of several years, but there's been more of an emphasis on not really a distribution and a market of ideas, I think, but instead the fitting of entries into preset domains of acceptable ideas. And we can see that manifest in a lot of ways, socially and politically for sure. But sort of underneath the surface, that always reflects on the actual attitudes and the aesthetics that are behind those social and political stances. Because art is always ahead, always somewhat a few steps paced ahead of something like politics, right? Or just sociality, socio-biological culture in general. And so that's really already happened. The social and political things that we see so obviously manifested at the SCP Wiki has already sort of quietly taken place as if mountains underwater, right? There's a whole mountain range underwater at the SCP when it comes to those same sorts of pigeonholes, narrow bands of acceptability, and tunnel vision just applied to sort of ideas, writing styles, different approaches to the same idea. So, that's something to be said. I'm not trying to take anything away from DJ Cactus. I'm not saying that he's not a good writer, okay? What I am saying is that what he does best is anticipate and tailor, products for the consumption of the voting class and of the attention of the audience at the SCP Wiki at large. So, if DJ Cactus tells you you've got a banger of an article, it's definitely the case.
Because I read it ahead of time and it was great. But you can always kind of tell articles like that are going to be, break out and they get, memed on and turned into this kind of larger than life thing. But, excuse me. Other ones like the IKEA article that Mordos wrote a couple years ago, or Ice Pick.
Not part of the 3,000 contest. A lot of people think it was.
Those just randomly come out of nowhere. And when they get big like that, that I think is a benefit for everybody because you
Yep.
get more eyes on new articles, you get more eyes on new authors.
Well, I mean, it's the whole containment breach situation all over again, right? I mean, what's not said here very clearly by DJ Cactus is that it's always an exchange. It's never 100% positive, and I think he would probably admit this. It's just that he hasn't mentioned it. When something like that pops out into the mainstream, it's the same thing that happened with the containment breach. I mean, yeah, on the net, it's probably a net benefit. You got to keep the site around, and the sort of events that Cactus is talking about here are certainly contributory to the SCP Wiki still being around, 13, 14 years, whatever, which is better than it not existing, right? I mean, all things considered. It's kind of like what Dr. DeGears said. He said, when something sits out in the sun too long and it's a photo, and the photo sort of loses its picture and its clarity and its vision, and it sort of gets washed out by this very bright sunlight, this limelight of the mainstream that it's in, to the extent that it is in that limelight. But he also said that, I'm happy that the SCP Wiki is still here, right? So I mean, like, all these things considered, yeah, it's not perfect. Like, yeah, there's some things that have been lost along the way. The soul of the project really is one of those things, in my opinion. But you still have to come out saying, well, at least we still have it. So, these sorts of mainstream exposures and explosions certainly are good for that reason. I think it has trickle down things, which is to say that these things are sort of escaping the containment cell of the SCP, right? So when the SCP gets bigger and bigger, that entails a reduction in certain things. I mean, I'll give you a good example is that the popularity of the SCP Wiki right now is such that no one can keep up with the articles coming out when it comes to quality curation, when it comes to content control, right? That's one thing that's been left behind. It's the amount of articles coming in totally outpaces the rigors for the standards, the thresholds for quality work. That whole system that used to be sort of hand in hand and walking together is completely broken at the SCP Wiki. No one can keep the curation, the quality standards cannot keep up with the influx of articles anymore. And it's been that way for a while, but it certainly is more that way now than ever. And you're about to see that in the 7K contest, by the way. And so you lose that, but it's kind of like that game Whack-A-Mole, where it goes down, or like some sort of Hydra. When you cut it off, like another one pops up somewhere else. And the people at the SCP Wiki are so reluctant to even approach this idea. Like, they won't let themselves think of this because of the political realities, which is its own shame. We don't have to talk more about. But those things still exist. They're still alive. Those sort of like more underground sort of benefits to the genre, to writing in the genre. Those sort of tight-knit groups of cultural artisans and sort of commentators and tight bands of schools of thought. Those things still exist. They just pop up somewhere else, right? And so it's almost like this big funnel funneling into a garden and fertilizing the garden. That one thing that's doing that may change, and maybe not always for the better, but it does enable and allow, beautiful things that have a new beauty about them, and that recapture some of the things about the old that is now lost and gone very well because of it. So,
and you get a wider range of people interacting with the community,
which is paradoxical, right? Because that's actually not what we see. Cactus makes a great point. It's a great a priori logical point, which is that when you have exposure to something like a mainstream, you should get an increase in diversity, right? The surface area of your participation should increase. Yet that's not what we see at the Wiki. It's almost like everything is being pressed through a meat grinder, or some sort of sausage press. It doesn't matter what the diversity is when it comes to the SCP. It all gets funneled and processed into this sausage link of the same thing over and over, whether it's left-leaning liberal sort of political ideology, things like that. it really selects for and only allows one type of thinker. And that's why people like me and Harmony are more vilified than we actually probably should be, honestly, is because we think differently. That's just the bottom line. We think differently. Okay? That's it. I mean, they want to mask it in some sort of evil agenda. We don't have any evil agenda. We just think differently than you. And honestly, we're thinking bigger than you. The SCP wants to bury its head into its own, cavernous area and not recognize the fact that there's something bigger going on than them now. They hate that. That bothers the hell out of them. That's really what's behind most of the resistance to containment fiction. First of all, the emotion, it's purely emotional. There's people who don't like Harmony and people who don't like me. And because they don't like us, they by definition transitory in a way that they don't have the nuance or the framework to sort of separate. They can't like anything that we touch, right? But more than that, deeper than that, more psychologically telling and more psychologically tangled than that is the fact that people don't want to recognize, people who are inundated and sort of neck deep into the SCP Wiki, where they feel like they're in the most important place, which they are, which is the irony of it. But they feel like recognizing that there's something that actually leapfrogs them. There's some umbrella concept that escapes them and reaches out farther than just them. They hate that. They hate thinking that way. And so that really explains probably, I think, 90%, 90 maybe even higher than that, of the hostility to the term containment fiction. You'll see people criticizing the term containment fiction in ways that you wouldn't see anyone else criticize any other name for any attempted genre. And that's a clue. All right, so we're about 15 minutes into this. I certainly had a great time talking. Like I said, DJ Cactus is always a time that I enjoy listening to because I always have so many thoughts, so much to say when listening to what he wants to talk about. So I do appreciate that part of it. Once again, I disagree with most everything he ends up saying, but that doesn't matter because this really should be about the free exchange of ideas and sort of a dialectic between diverse positions so that we can have conversations like this that don't just devolve into internet arguing, which we all know what that looks like. That's really the purpose of what I do a lot with my blog. To a lesser extent, the Society for Containment Fiction, I'm kind of just there, but mainly my blog. My blog is mainly, the purpose of it is the distribution of ideas that are meant to disrupt the monopoly of philosophy, policy, and definitions of things like quality writing that are coming from the SCP Wiki. It's really about a free exchange of those ideas and a productive conversation about those ideas. So, I'm really happy to be contrasting Cactus here in so many ways. I mean, obviously what he says carries a lot more weight and gets a lot farther than what I have to say, but that doesn't make what I'm saying any less valid. Or potentially effective, maybe just in a long time from now. All right, well, thanks for joining tonight. It's been about an hour, so tomorrow night we'll get ready and geared up for our Weekend Collapsible. Harmony will be joining us. Obviously, she's going to be part of the show now just as frequently as she can be because, I need the help, honestly, with just the quantity of articles that are coming in still. Although those have slowed down this week, and I'll give you a hint as to why. I'll let you think about that. I'll answer that tomorrow night. It's a very, very good reason. The number of articles has been cut in half this week, and I wonder if you know why. So tune into that. That should be fun. I hope I don't get called away from that show. Once again, my job is such that I could get called at any moment and have to leave the house to go to the hospital. That's just the job that I have, and it's job security, so I can't be too bad about that. But we'll try to do what we can tomorrow night. We'll also try to do what we can on Sunday with SCP Meta. That's 12 o'clock. That's noon CST, okay, for about an hour. So check that out. All right, would appreciate you coming in. Always a good time, and I really, once again, appreciate you being here. I have one person in the audience at all times, so I really appreciate that. That's really cool to me. So anyways, this has been SCPCRNP, a.k.a. Like a Lepers, and I will see you next time. Take it easy. Bye-bye now.